Hi, this is Gabriel Hartley, and it is Saturday of Easter weekend, a pretty significant day, especially in terms of the kind of global initiation complexes we've been talking about and looking at in Joseph Campbell and some of the works, including The Matrix, with the references to resurrection and so on of Neo. But I'm not going to get into that right now. I want to give just kind of since this is the end of the semester that we've had together, and in ways I haven't communicated, it's also my last semester of teaching. I'm retiring at the end of this semester, and this is a kind of poignant moment for me in wanting to, feeling myself compelled to give the best possible final lecture and lesson that I can. Also recognizing that life goes on, time. While time might be an illusion from certain perspectives, it nevertheless is an illusion that has great impact on how we manage ourselves in trying to get through the kind of social contract that we have about deadlines and so on, especially in an academic context where there isn't much room for actual exploration and learning and finding yourself. That's a lifetime process. And I'm assuming, knowing that we're all human beings, I assume that much anyway, that a lot of what we've covered this semester, it might in some ways have been mysterious, at times awkward, and so on, annoying, exhilarating, awesome in the true sense of inspiring awe, and awful in the sense of, oh, geez, how am I going to get this done in time for the next blog post, and so on. So I wanted to take a few minutes. I don't know quite where this particular lesson, this video will go. I'm being a little more spontaneous, and wanted to mention, especially for those of you who might go into teaching, who might be involved in public speaking in different formats in your careers, either currently or coming up, is that I have found in the creation of these videos a kind of inner compulsion to perfection, and one that is difficult to maintain, again, due to time constrictions, due to life impact, and so on. And it's interesting because when we meet face to face in the classroom, uh, I don't, you meet on a certain day and the lesson has to happen this day. It either works or doesn't work. But then that's it. You go on to the next thing. So there's a kind of built in artificiality to this online structure that imposes on me anyway. And it's something I'm sure I will grow with as I go on. I'm sure I will continue in various online capacities in the future, even though I'll be outside of Ohio University after the semester, it is this kind of impulse toward perfection. I'm working with video editing and so on, and knowing what can be done to make the presentation more artful, more true to my intentions, getting rid of the messy details that the face-to-face conversation we would have in class would entail. So that's one reason I decided to just do a kind of cold. I don't have notes in front of me or anything right now, and thought I'd just start talking. Um, One of the difficulties I've found in trying to put together the material for the second half of the semester. I've done this before in classes, but again, it's in the moment. It's okay, here's the day we talk about the matrix, here's what we say, and we don't have time to do more. Um, is this compulsion to get everything down, and Neuromancer. Neuromancer, you might or might not have picked up on, was the just one of many novels that William Gibson has written. So I was spending much of this semester, as well as the winter break, even before the semester began, rereading some of those novels. I read his entire series of novels about 10 years ago or so, 15 years ago. And they're really amazing, compelling from my perspective, and really do inform where the Wachowskis pick up in this material when they create the Matrix trilogy, especially with the understanding by the time you get to the end of the trilogy that there are all these various competing AI programs or artificial intelligence programs that are competing with each other. I would say for domination, but they're actually competing with each other just to fulfill their programming, to do what it is there to do. Yeah, I'm going to put the world into balance, as the architect says, whereas the oracle is there to unbalance that kind of totalitarian logic that lies behind this kind of technocratic balance that the architect has in mind, where any kind of human working outside of the program is an anomaly, an unwanted anomaly, as he says to Neo. Um, Now, one of the, I guess I'll just keep talking at the moment to try to pull things together, and I may or may not edit this by splicing in some other movie scenes. I spent quite a bit of time this week selecting various scenes from the movies, um, but they might be implicit in my discussion here. One of the interpretations that I've found, there are a couple good videos available on YouTube um, on interpretation of the ending of the Matrix, and the idea that Neo is told by the architect that he is himself an AI. He is himself a program, just as all the other characters he comes into contact with. And I have spent the week kind of mulling that over. I've been thinking about it for quite some time, but given our timeline in class, thinking, okay, taking that fairly seriously. And yesterday, as I was going back over that material on Good Friday, which again, in the context of cosmic myth, as Joseph Campbell would put it, is the burial moment, the initiation, where the initiate is underground in the tomb for 3 days before arising into fulfillment and wisdom. The idea that Neo is an AI, I think, misses the mark. It is clear from what I can see in the architect scene. I'll probably put these as appendices at the end of this and just kind of talk off the top of my head while all this is together. In the architect scene, the architect mentions that this particular instantiation of the matrix is the sixth run. And so there have been many other versions, five at least, but if you see all those screens on the wall around Neo, you can see that he has come and confronted the architect multiple times in the past, and that this is simply the latest one. And as the camera pans in and out of each of those screens, we're not even sure which one is the real screen at this moment. In any case, the key point that the architect makes is that the Neo is irrevocably, I think is the word he says, irrevocably or irretrievably, I forget which, but let's say irrevocably human. And I think that's the point. The fact that there are multiple iterations of the matrix does not negate the existence of and reality of the human. And so, especially when you get into the mediated structures of consciousness that the cyber world, that all the works we've been looking at this second half explore, implies, there, the human is part of the interface here between, the so-called real world and not surreal, the Baudrillard word simulacrum, the simulacra. Um, uh, uh, that doesn't negate humanity. It just means that humanity is implicated in all these other structures and contexts that shape and formulate and offer openings and closures within a landscape of consciousness that gives us not only the chance to know this or that, but to make choices. And as we've seen in the movies, choice becomes one of the key issues. And interestingly, the Oracle focuses on her choices. And I emphasize her because, in a very strict sense, there isn't when we get into Joseph Campbell's ultimate position, which he gets from Advaita Vedanta, which I've talked about before, sexuality itself is part of the illusion of separation. And so the distinction between the sexes and genders is part of how creation is working itself out. As Campbell puts it in the cosmogonic section, which you can find this in other ways in schools of philosophy before, after Socrates, in what is called Plotinus, figures of that. But Gnosticism picks this up as well as Kabbalah and many other esoteric wisdom formulations that the entire, all of existence is an emanation from the source. And one of the phrases that keeps coming back in the Matrix Reloaded is return to source. And that's what the Oracle ultimately tells Neo. He's got to go back to the source, which is, we find out, the architect. And confront that source in order to understand, where did he come from? What is he supposed to do? Who am I? And this goes in many ways. One way of formulating this, I wouldn't say it's the origin, because notions of origin like that are pretty artificial. But one key place this happens in history is the Oracle at Delphi, who is actually the major figure for Socrates. And above the entry to Delphi is the expression "know yourself." And Socrates says, "The only thing I know is that I don't know." And so knowing becomes our lifelong or multiple lifelong mission. Given that Socrates, as many cultures, is in a framework that accepts that we have multiple lives, and that the purpose of these multiple lives is to work through these emanations from the source to the greatest of, let's start from the beginning, the source, which is undifferentiated. The unity of all has no distinctions. Um, but and there have been various ways to try to describe the initial impulse into what we call creation here, but in the Sufi tradition, God wanted to know himself, and so created humans in order to have a reflection and a conversation, a kind of self reflection that would lead to God's own understanding of what the source is. And so this emanation is a working into greater and greater detail. So it's greater and greater distinction, discrimination, division, and so on. So the distinction between male and female, for instance, is one way in which these energies of the universe express themselves as this kind of yin yang way of bringing what we would otherwise, in rational terms, imagine as opposites into some kind of unity, which transcends all logic and all rationality. Um, so, behind this, if we begin with the undifferentiated source of all, which then creates the world as an emanation of itself, an emanation, something emanating from without, and in further and further detail, greater and greater distinctions, um, ultimately reaches a point of kind of infinite differentiation. And then there's a shift, a very important shift away from greater and greater separation, which is necessary. Separation is a necessary aspect of the emanation, exploration, manifestation of the divine, of the source, of reality, of the DNA, whatever you might want to use as your touchstone for the source of everything, uh, back to reintegration. So there's unity, then an infinite progress of differentiation, and then a turning point at which point there's a move toward reintegration. But it's not simply a reintegration back into a kind of abstract, um, mindless unity, but now a unity that knows itself through all of this differentiation as still itself. So, if we keep coming back to the kind of slogan for our class, which is very much the slogan for Joseph Campbell as well, uh, that we suffer, that one of the greatest problems for all humanity, but one certainly today, is that we suffer from the illusion of separation. Then it should be our mission to, first of all, recognize that, and to recognize we are all one. We are all part of the same infinite emanation of the source, however we conceive of the source, and draw all these elements, filaments, however you might want to think of it, back together into some infinitely intricate tapestry that now is unified again, but unified in differentiation. And so, if we're talking about sexual differentiation, racial differentiation, national differentiation, planetary differentiation, whatever it might be, um, the key is to recognize I am that. Tvat. Now I'm not remembering the Sanskrit phrase, but I will at some point. Um, um, anyway, um, that I think is what's behind the matrix as well. And the key, as we see in the matrix, which can often get left out of these discussions, is um, that we see when Sati takes over Neo's role. Neo has destroyed the illusion of separation. And now Sati, the young girl, the program, but I still think that oversimplifies what's actually at work here, is able to create a unified world of beauty and harmony, as we see with the sunrise and so on at the end of, excuse me, the movies. Uh, I think it's too simple and simplistic to just say Neo is another program. And if we, but that isn't to say that that would be a problem if that were the case. I just don't think it fits with the actual language of the movies. It's closer to Philip K. Dick's story about electric sheep that became the um, uh, here's my stroke moment of trying to recall these things. Shoot, the movie Blade Runner. Blade Runner. Yeah, I won't. I'm not going to go back and edit these out either because, again, if we were in class, this would be happening this way, and it's that real moment that I'm actually missing in this kind of mediated relationship we have through the miracle of the internet, but also the drawbacks in terms of assumptions that brings into play. Um, so I guess if we go back through, and I think what I'll do at the end of this is simply uh, embed this video into a page with links rather than weave it all together as one video. But expect you to go through that page and open those links individually in a kind of sequence so that you can imagine what such a video would be. Um, one place we would begin is the very beginning and my first video with you on the role of Joseph Campbell in our course. And for one thing, I'll say I'm very aware that in academia for a few decades now, Joseph Campbell has been, for many disciplines, a kind of embarrassment. I think that's too bad, obviously, and it's part of what I see as a problem in academia. But I won't go into that right now. But in any case, I think there's a lot of value in the hero book that hasn't been fully integrated. There's a major cult of Joseph Campbell in many ways too, but I'm not really convinced that everyone involved with that really catches what Campbell was up to. But let me go back to the very first page in the prologue, the monomyth, and read again some of the opening lines in the second paragraph. Well, first of all, I'll just read the first pages again that I did as we began the class in the section on myth and dream. Whether we listen with aloof amusement to the dreamlike mumbo-jumbo of some red-eyed witch doctor of the Congo, or read with cultivated rapture thin translations from the sonnets of the mystic Lao Tzu, now and again crack the hard nutshell of an argument of Aquinas, or catch suddenly the shining meaning of a bizarre Eskimo fairy tale, it will always be, and this is the key point behind everything Campbell says and for the course, the one shape-shifting yet marvelously constant story that we find, together with a challengingly persistent suggestion of more remaining to be experienced than will ever be known or told. Now, the last part of that sentence is in many ways hard to catch, to latch onto. So we have the one shape-shifting yet marvelously constant story. But that story is not done. That story has more to tell us. We are part of that story, and we have our own role in telling this story. And in many ways, this is sort of point of the Matrix as well. There have been many Neos before this that hasn't exhausted the possibilities of what is to come. And so together, we will find together with a challengingly persistent suggestion of more remaining to be experienced than will ever be known or told. There will never be an end to this. So it isn't all restricted down to, oh, this is just white male patriarchal domination. This is infinite. This goes across all various ways we can imagine this illusion of separation of humanity into these various different cultural, sexual, racial manifestations. Throughout the inhabited world, in all times and under every circumstance, myths of man have flourished and will continue to flourish. And they have been the living inspiration of whatever else may have appeared out of the activities of the human mind and body. It would not be too much to say, and this is a key line, it would not be too much to say that myth is the secret opening through which the inexhaustible energies of the cosmos pour into the human cultural manifestation. And I now take that sentence very literally and very seriously in ways that my academic preparation wouldn't have allowed for earlier in my life. It is the secret opening through which the inexhaustible energies of the cosmos pour into the human cultural manifestation. Religions, philosophies, arts, the social forms of primitive and historic man, prime discoveries in science and technology, the very dreams that blister sleep, boil up from the basic magic ring of myth. So, there is no distinction here between primitive and modern in the sense that he has just as much admiration for the so-called primitive as the so-called modern, the so-called primitive versus civilized and so on, which is simply basically a white supremacist notion that Campbell himself rejected. Just as he did sexual distinction as a kind of ultimate truth. He rejected that. So if we go back through my earlier videos, basically what I'm trying to prepare you for is a way to imagine what we've done this semester and how that might play out in your paper. This is not a requirement, but it's simply, were I to write your paper right now, this is what I think we've been prepared to do. I would then go on to the PDF document, and that'll be a link there as well, to the site that goes over the cosmogonic section of Campbell's book. And actually before that, there's the web page I made going over Campbell's outline of the cosmogonic section, but he does it early in the book, when he's going over. This is still part of the prologue, giving a sense of what's going to happen in the book. And let me it was in section 3 on what is page 30. This is without the cover, but this is the book I ordered for you to get. But I don't care which one you have. But in my book, it's page 30. Let's get this out of the light there. And I'm reading from the bottom where it says the Cosmogonic Cycle, Part 2. Part 2, the Cosmogonic Cycle, Part 2 of the book, unrolls the great vision of the creation and destruction of the world, which is vouchsafed as revelation to the successful hero. Chapter 1 emanations, and remember we're talking about emanations, the way that the source unfolds itself into greater and greater distinctions, treats of the coming of the forms of the universe out of the void, out of emptiness. Chapter 2, The Virgin Birth, is a review of the creative and redemptive roles of the female power, first on a cosmic scale as the mother of the universe, then again on the human plane as the mother of the hero. And for better or worse, this is very much not Freudian. This would be more Jungian if we want to find a more accurate analog here, in that we all have masculine and feminine, and what's attached to our particular biological bodies is a social convention. We all participate in the feminine and in the masculine. Chapter 3, Transformations of the Hero, traces the course of the legendary history of the human race through its typical stages, the hero appearing on the scene in various forms according to the changing needs of the race. And Chapter 4, Dissolutions, tells of the foretold end, first of the hero, then of the manifested world. So, the hero and the manifested world. What's involved here is that the first half of the book is focusing on the hero and the various stages. Let's see, what are the three stages? I'll just go to the chapter titles: Departure, Initiation, and Return. And if we imagine, for instance, this is Easter weekend, Good Friday is the moment of initiation, Easter Sunday is the moment of return. You've got the story of the hero. That is set within the context of the entire universe. The hero's story is meaningless if it's not part of something much larger. And in many ways, each of us, are the hero. And we, each of us, are a particular manifestation of the source as it plays itself out through these emanations and dissolutions. So in the, I'll try to get this up here again. There we go. The Cosmogonic Cycle, emanations, virgin birth, transformations, and dissolutions. The PDF document that I gave you is a very good overview of that. But I believe the Matrix, and especially when we get to Matrix Revolutions, is a perfect story for bringing these together, because Neo, obviously, especially in the first movie, Neo is the hero. He's on the hero's journey. And there is that throughout, because we have the emphasis on Neo, except at the end, he dies. He's the sacrifice. Again, we have Easter weekend and so on. And in many ways, he prepares the way for Sati to take over the beauty of manifestation of harmony and so on. It's a story of the birth and death of the universe, of the cosmos, and that's what the cosmogony, the cosmogonic cycle is. What is the birth? Where did the universe come from? It's an attempt to answer that. And who are we in our individual lives as we work our way through the texture of the universe? So I will have the links for that, and let me think off the top of my head. Beyond that, then I'll just give you references to whether I actually give you links. I separated out little video segments, and I might just post them for you on our site in a way that we can have access to. I don't know if this will be through Blackboard or the website. The difficulty is the website is public, and Blackboard is not, and with copyright issues, it might be more difficult to put them out in a public um, context. Anyway, uh, I think uh, pretty much if we were in a class, this would be basically the end of that kind of lecture. And if you then, after all these links, go to the paper assignments, I, one topic, as you've already seen probably, is how do you bring all these different works together? How does Animatrix, for instance, give you a deeper sense of, because the Wachowskis were the producers and creators of that as well. Um, what are they telling us in the Animatrix movies? If you want to talk about that, uh, 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 what in the movie? The video on return to source philosophy in the Matrix. That I think is a very good and important video for bringing the three movies together. Um, I have a mixed reaction to it. I think it's kind of hokey in some places. I think its reference to kind of classical Western philosophers is there. It's important, and the Wachowskis are dealing with that. Um, but I think they're going far beyond that. To be talking about Hobbes and Descartes and even Kant in that section. I've spent a good part of my life writing about these things. Um, it doesn't go far enough. It doesn't go nearly far enough, and that's really where, for me, um, Joseph Campbell and the way he goes far beyond the Western structure, the Western closet, you might say, closure, um, provides us with a much greater context, greater in the sense of larger, more encompassing, more universal. A lot of times the criticism is that Joseph Campbell gives a Western view and then extrapolates that, says that I think it's completely the opposite. I do think while there might be moments here and there, where he um, loses track of that, especially if you see the movie Sukhavati, which I had been tempted to have you get as well. And I'll leave that as kind of homework after the class is over. Maybe this summer, if you can get a copy of Sukhavati, it's a stunning movie, and it really brings Campbell into this context of what was he really doing, what was he really up to, because there, like I said, there's a cult of Campbell that I'm not especially fond of. There's also an academic appropriation of Campbell's hero work that in the end, it takes out the actual impulse behind it. It's not meant just to be a format, a handout, to help you then say, okay, ABC, here's how the hero's journey works, here's where Frodo fits in, and so on. That reduces the complexity and the mystery that's behind it. There's a moment in I don't remember if this is, I think it's in Sukhavati, but there's a moment where yeah, it is. Campbell is in Delphi, I believe. He's in maybe it's the caves in southern France. Um, and he's looking. He says, when you go in there and you look at the the paintings on the walls, they speak to you. And that's one of the few moments where Campbell actually gives a sense of his own engagement with this kind of initiatory mythic integration into something much larger than the human, because he's serious. When you go in those caves, they speak to you. You learn something in embracing the spirit of those caves and the artists that put the paintings there that you wouldn't otherwise. And So there's something way beyond, simply a handout that I could give you in class. Um, you need to get out there yourself, um, or just go to Stroud's Run, Old Man's Cave, and so on, and actually listen to to what the universe is saying. So, in many ways, this is our last day of class, even though we haven't had this face to face class together. I hope this is actually recording when I get to the end of all this. And I'll leave it there and I'll put everything else on a web page that this will be embedded into. So I wish you all well in your journeys, your own hero's journeys as you go forward in the world and try to make it a better place. Try to help others see that we are not stuck in the illusion of separation. Uh, we are all part of something much greater than we've been told. So, peace to you. Take care.